Hey guys, here we are again with the 11th part, and yes, we've been really busy. Thank you for your time and being here with us. We'll need to do 2 or 3 more parts tomorrow. Not reshoot, but there's always more coming up.
To my mind,
And I'll start with
a question.
at the point where we stopped now. We're just before the implosion, as you call it, of the charter. Kasra isn't a real Hell's Angel, he just wants to protect his business.
No, he just wants to have his peace. He actually just wants to have his peace. This also means safeguarding the business, steering clear of conflict, and stepping out of the spotlight, whether it's from leaders, presidents, or anyone else. Basically, I just want to have my peace, do my own things, and that's the situation I'm in right now.
Did you personally still enjoy at that point saying something like, I don't know, Klaus 81 is celebrating his 20th anniversary in Memmingen? Club anniversary, there are nice bratwursts, a fire barrel, there are bratwursts, a fire barrel, beer, and there's stripping, which I think you won't be able to see anymore afterwards. There's stripping and a great party. Kassra will drop by for 3 days.
Yeah, well, honestly, I never really liked all that fire barrel and bratwurst stuff anyway.
We have a fire barrel, you know. Yeah.
So a fireball? Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's cool. However, we were never fans of those classic biker parties that people are familiar with, and neither was I. But it was just a different kind of crowd, but we still went there a few times, and yeah, honestly, I just don't feel like it anymore. Like going to parties and stuff. We were still out and about a bit, of course. Everything kept going, the whole machinery. I was always there and knew how things worked. I wanted peace, so I went along and did things occasionally, but I wasn't into the partying anymore. There wasn't much happening. Eventually, only the Danon family still visited us. Over the years, many people visited our place, but that eventually changed. In the end, only the Danon family and a Portuguese guy with whom I had a connection were left. He was transferred to us due to problems in the Lisbon Charter. Otherwise, there was no one else.
So in general, just to see, okay, cool, I'll go to that charter, people you know and so on, that was...
We didn't do that anyway. I still remember a situation. You know him too. Southport. There was once a young guy from Harbour City, I think he was still a prostic, a young strong guy who got shot in the stomach. I don't know if you know the story. I know the story, yeah, right. And I knew him well. Yeah, I knew him personally. He had his sponsor member, he was this big older guy, an elderly German man whose name I cannot recall. From Harbour City, not Southport. And I wanted to go visit her. That was also around that time. I think it was still summer. I liked her. I wanted to visit to see how he was doing. You drive down, I pick up a couple of guys, and we set off. I had Channel, a member from Southport who you also know. I spoke with him on the phone. Hey, how's it going? Do you want to come down? You don't have to. He's not responsive yet, but it's up to you. I said, we're coming down. I want to be there, so he knows I was there. And on the way on the A24 towards Hamburg, we hadn't even gone 30, 40 kilometers when Kaylee called. Where are you going? I said, yeah, visiting my brother because of this and that. Yeah, but he's still at the thing and all. Why are you going there on your own? I said, yeah, I wanted to visit my brother. No, turn around. There's no point in going there. Turn around. And then we turned around. So it was also not really independent on his own terms. He had to be. He was the charter. It was about him. He had to be in front.
But it was also a nice gesture, of course, that...
He had a completely different mindset and perspective, especially compared to his time as president versus his earlier charter. It doesn't matter what structure it is. It's about the head, the leadership. You were also an asshole. That's a strong assumption.
Absolutely.
But it's still, that's also totally unusual. First he goes there alone, that a few members go there on their own, that's also good. Then they have it, that they understood it too. I would then see, okay guys, they are taking responsibility.
Everyone sees...
And I don't want to go, but for him not going means he won't be seen as the leader. He wants to be in control and make the decisions, leaving me without the freedom to constantly think, decide, or change things.
But don't you almost feel like a schoolboy being called back? Of course, absolutely. And then you call Hamburg and say, oh no, we actually have business in Berlin. Yeah, but I...
Don't know either. We'll stay at home. We have things to do at home. And sorry. Okay, no problem. I'll cancel the hotel bookings for you again. And of course, that's how it was, but it was the same. He was always like that. He always told people how to live and corrected their lives. For example, we had a brochure from a member who later left. Thank God he was smart enough. He was able to leave because his brother is a member. He's still a member today. He's in Turkey, but he's still a member, and he was also left alone. He had an acquaintance, also a prostitute, whom he was with either for business or not. After some time, he became serious about her and moved in together. He told KMD, referring to her as that hooker. You don't love a prostitute, you don't move in together, you don't pretend it's love.
Wasn't he also having an affair with the ex-hooker?
That's already bipolar or something.
It's like God is self-righteous and just hypocritical too, and that's been recurring over and over. I later discovered that he spoke very disparagingly about my child's mother, calling her a fat pig and other insulting things. With his affair, and my partner at the time, that's the mother of my child, had to do with his wife, the children. He also spoke disparagingly about his own wife during his vacation, which was very undignified. He had no shame or boundaries in this matter, but that's irrelevant. It's a personal decision. It always indicated a lack of boundaries and framework.
What was your situation like?
Still regulated.
Also mentally, you know?
But you're still with your first wife. Yeah, but only for a short time.
Before the separation, everything was already broken. I mean, I was a total jerk. My relationships were terrible, I behaved poorly, and I was an asshole. I don't want to claim any moral high ground, God forbid.
You're not doing that, the viewers can see that.
Again, don't get me wrong, we're talking about the old stories, and sometimes it's just the new perspective on the old one, and you too, when you go back in time and play out those scenes, you just shake your head at yourself and at the people, and you wonder how that happened. So don't get me wrong, I was just as much of a jerk back then, otherwise I wouldn't have fit in. It's just that the situations were what made me take notice, and that's what led to slowly, step by step, getting out of that mental glue. And also slowly breaking free from that structure. It was hard, but sometimes I got pulled back in again. It was always a constant struggle, but I was still far from being ready to really get out.
The Big Bang came later. Yes, Big Bang, atomic bomb, imploding, depending on what we want to call it. But we have a picture of it.
Of what then
happens. I would still ask like this. You get visitors, you go to visit, mainly Denmark. What does it look like when a Danish charter comes to visit? So how should we imagine that? Do you go to the Italian restaurant first?
Yes.
It was always top management who came, not just low-level members, which was very rare. The top management was responsible. Lars is no longer involved or part of the club. Good communication with the Danish authorities. But he was always the middleman between Nomads and KAD and him. And Klaas got along well with him. And was the leadership team. Back then, Brock is no longer among the living. He hanged himself in his cell in 2014, and Sven was also a leader with the Nomads at that time. He later patched over to the Comancheros in Denmark, supposedly. From Kim, the former brother. The club brother, who was terminally ill, saved money for his wife's pension. When he passed away, the money was supposed to be given to his widow, but they stole it instead. He took it, got out, and then fled to another club. That's the information I got from the authorities, and I assume it's correct since they're more involved in the matter. That's how it ended, but it was always those two who came. Both were well known and both were murderers. Brock definitely was a murderer, maybe even a double murderer. In broad daylight at the airport in Denmark, he shot 2 Bilitis, got 12 years for it, served the full sentence, and of course after that, he moved up in the leadership ranks. They frequently visited, spent time with us, and joined us for meals. The first thing we did was go eat steak with them. Sometimes we also went out for sushi with them. The last time, actually, we went to eat asado. That's a Kuchi nearby by the jet gas station. We ate at one of their several branches. I disliked the place because it always smelled like a bathroom. I think we always went there to eat. And sometimes, Durelos, this 50%. I still remember everything. We were relaxed with food and sometimes went to novel restaurants. It's not like we didn't. Yeah, we were there and they were always at the hotel, and then already in the evening we sat with them a bit in the clubhouse or somewhere in the Sahara, and then we went straight to the Artemis meeting and they got stuck there for a day or two. And alcohol, drugs? Yeah, not necessarily just partying. A little alcohol, and then the guests just enjoy the services of the ladies. Who pays for that? Kadir and the others handled the arrival arrangements, but the women took care of themselves. The text seems to be incomplete. If they used services with the women, then the service was provided. But food, drinks, hotel, and all the entrance arrangements, we handled those. They were connected. I forgot the name. The Artemis manager was good to us and friends with Nedjo at the time. The one back then, I don't know if he still is today, Keenan. And that's why we sometimes just went in and all that. Therefore, everything was completely relaxed. Yeah, that's how you can imagine it. They didn't spend much time out on the streets with us because we wanted to avoid exposing them to police repression. As a result, interactions on the street were brief. People would sit around but not linger long in the Sahara area. We wanted to be quick, just say hello, maybe stay for an hour or two, and then leave again, because we simply didn't want it. It's uncomfortable for the guests. We also had situations like back then when we had a raid. It was about the patch over in 2012. Like I said, the Kasra charter Bandidos, which did a patch over as a prospect charter to the Potsdam one. There were also members from California and Denmark there. Their doors were also busted open, and there are video recordings showing them lying on the ground and being searched because of some altercations they associated with us. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. And they just wanted to avoid that to make things comfortable for the guests.
Yeah, we have to talk about this bomb implosion somehow now. So what's the starting point? Starting signal, starting point when you say, okay, now the gates to hell are opening somehow?
I think it was already open. I think they just poured a bit more oil into hell to really make it implode, because it was already hot the whole time anyway. It's difficult to say for certain, but it's currently the latter part of 2013. Everyone is familiar with the soda process. Let's just start with the soda process. We also need to hold back a little there. I can't go into too much detail there because there's also a final conviction. Soda, what is?
Soda?
Soda Club, a well-known nightclub in the Kulturbohörde, is a nice and cool place. It's well represented. It's in Mitte and mostly middle class, so it's not exclusive. There aren't really any criminal activities. It's just a normal club that's well known and has a good reputation. And the Kulturbohörde is certainly well known among Berliners and others.
To be...
Exactly. And it was like this. There were people who wanted to... I'm deliberately avoiding names because there is still a legally binding conviction. It's legally binding or an acquittal, so it's just about privacy, and that's simply how it is. We can't translate it over those things. But we have to stay correct about that. And it was like this. There were a few guys from North Rhine-Westphalia and a few guys from our chapter who wanted to go into the club. But that's also confirmed. This is the backstory to the Sodomord, as separate from the actual event. Video recordings of the backstory exist and can be discussed openly. They were denied entry due to their attitude, appearance, or level of intoxication. And the bouncers were experienced bouncers. They stood firm on their stance, refusing to change their opinion. Then there was a discussion classic. Who are you? We're so-and-so. We don't care, this is our land. You're not coming in. One word led to another. Boom, there was a fight with the bouncers. The men present were severely beaten and couldn't defend themselves. And then they were beaten off the yard by the stars.
He pretends to be...
Of course, that's obvious, especially when you act like that cold as you are now. We are the ones, and she is just unmatched in embarrassment in that scene. And the guys also got beaten off the yard, and what's the word? There are video recordings of it that's also confirmed, so you can talk about it very calmly. Yeah, and then they were gone just like that, soaking wet and led away like a beaten dog, chased off the yard like a dog. I wasn't really involved in that topic as I was already a bit more distant, traveling back and forth to Hamburg a lot, busy with my own business, and I didn't really notice those thugs directly. In retrospect, as a result of that, a few weeks later, A bouncer was shot behind me by an assassin. Somebody, right?
Somebody. I mean, I don't want to call him just anybody, but it wasn't targeted, right? I think.
Well, okay.
Someone was lying in wait and shot at the person. I don't know what. It wasn't a stray bullet or anything like that. They cut that out, aimed at the person. That's what the statement said. There are also recordings of the man being hit.
Did he die as well?
He died from a fatal gunshot wound to the hip that caused him to bleed to death. And yes, his name was Locke, so maybe offer condolences to the family as well. It's really tragic. The guy and the man who was standing at the door, he didn't even have anything to do with it. He wasn't even there that night during the fight. He didn't even know what was happening to him. When the Hells Angels are summoned in a situation like that, you realize it's a critical phase and caution is necessary. Both privately and professionally at the door and at home. Anyone working in nightlife is aware of the Hells Angels and their capabilities. Be careful with that charter. The man was unaware of what was happening to him as he wasn't involved in the matter at all. That's what people strongly assume, and he wasn't involved in the whole situation at all. He was just on duty at the door that day, standing outside alone. It was late, I think 4 or 5 in the morning, so the night was ending. He was standing normally at the door as seen in the footage where he had one leg on the railing. Suddenly bang, 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 and flashes were visible. And suddenly he falls down, he goes down and even screamed, he's wearing a mask, he's wearing a mask. He fell into the corridor and died in a way similar to a contact shot, according to staff. Of the word, he bled out from the hip and the
Police,
the police say. I assumed it came from the Hells Angels. I commented once, but now I'm holding back. As I said, we're dealing with a legally binding acquittal and conviction, so we simply have to respect and acknowledge that. I commented on it, made clear statements about it, then there was a trial and they were able to match DNA to my statements to the people I mentioned, and I can tell you the circumstances of how it happened. I then named people who came from our chapter. They were then arrested, or rather they were supposed to have done it. I'm getting a bit ahead of myself now, and they also found some DNA, but it wasn't enough because there were some lucky breaks. The DNA was only secured much later. The argument then was that a lot could have happened afterwards. The man walked to the nightclub alone. It's a legitimate objection, but its truth is another matter. But of course, that also makes it difficult for a court which is dealing with such a crime and such an accusation with a life sentence on the line. It's completely understandable to say, okay, and then there was also a dispute between me and the chamber back then, but we can go into that later. We can talk about it openly. The situation in the Soda murder was similar. The man was shot and people on the street said it came from the Hells Angels. The police assumed that but lacked suspects. I first heard about it in the newspaper or from the media, but I didn't have any connection to it because I wasn't involved in that topic and wasn't part of that scene. But that was the situation, that was the first death from that environment, and then the next thing happened, and then I was involved in the situation. There was a prospect of ours, someone who was a prospect, then left, then came back. It's not so important why or how, we can talk about that another time. If the viewers are interested in a direct exchange during the talk. That was Ismail, he was with us in Brustweg. He had a brother, also a well-known family in Spandau. His name was Jakub. He was always a very business-minded man. He did a lot of business and he wasn't known for any trouble. He was known for being smart, doing business, and some people liked him, others didn't, but he wasn't a notorious person known for violence or causing chaos in Berlin. He was simply known for doing business and always having his hand in things. He knows everyone, you know, because you know people like that too. In Berlin, especially in our former circles, there are often a few guys who only focus on making money without getting their hands dirty. And he was one of those guys, and he always used his connection to Kadir, our president, and his connection to us through his cousin and his brother, of course, to somehow pull us along with him. It was always give and take. In 2011, he was also assigned the XXX door to us. That's how we got it, the door. It's a former Turkish nightclub, shisha bar, and event venue with live music. The 3-story building on Frankfurter Alley was nicely set up at the time. I'll digress for a moment just to describe the person a little bit. The building had a nightclub downstairs and a shisha bar with a lounge and bar on the 2nd floor. And at the very top there was live music with tables, food, Turkish live music, and that's where we worked the door for a few months before it stopped due to high expenses leading to the night's closure. Back then, I was a silent partner at the door, and he did the same at traffic in 2013 at Alexanderplatz, where the AfD later held their party convention. That's just crazy. By the way, just a little fun fact. He then became a silent partner, communicated that, and we were there. But there was no. This time we didn't do the door because it was kind of difficult, because the police, the state criminal police, the bikers, the biker unit. Do you want to be a bit more serious? Yeah, and they put pressure on us. If you let those guys in here, we'll come every day, we'll come with the trade office, we'll go through your books, we'll tear your shop apart, you won't be able to do any business. We don't want to see that here. And that's why you were only there as a guest, more or less. And that was going on, it was new, I really didn't feel like going to the club, but somehow you end up being forced to go there, say hello, and then after a week or two of the opening or reopening or takeover, whatever it was. On the weekend, I went there with another brother, Prospect. We were like, where is everyone? We were eating at Rosenthaler Platz, I won't forget that, and then we went there and wondered, yeah, where is everyone? I called Sarge, Ibo, and Rami. He's also a member, also convicted because of the Expect story in prison, and he was there with him. And we were surprised, where is everyone? Usually you're always together in the group, and yeah, I don't know, call them. So I called Ibo, and then he picked up really loud, you could hear background music. I said, where are you? I can barely hear you. It's me. I'm out, I won't make it today, hangs up. And then with Kant, if he had any female company, he would slip away and always wanted to be a bit sneaky, a real rascal. With Rami, it was different. I called him again and asked, like, hey, where are you guys? He says they're there waiting in traffic and invites the brother to come over and chill with them for a bit. I said, yeah, all right, let's go. Then I said, come on, let's drive over there for half an hour. We drove there, arrived, and greeted the bouncers, former Bandidos supporters, now friends of the Hells Angels Club, though not official supporters. That's just the nature of things, like with the door and everything that comes with it, and also the co-owner. Greeted, entered, it was crowded, the venue was at capacity. The place was crowded, we sat for a while. I don't like huge crowds. Yeah, you know that. But that's how it was. We went in, sat there for a bit, one of the guys ordered a bottle, we sat with them, I had a drink, and after half an hour, 45 minutes, we actually wanted to leave. But just before we were about to go, I saw how a bouncer, two bouncers, ran downstairs really quickly, rushing down the door. Yeah, that already means something. As someone from the post-war era, you understand that something significant occurred during that time. And then I immediately see, he immediately points to Ismail Sur, that's the brother of the silent partner, running down as well, because the club belongs to his brother. Of course, he feels called to go down there too, and we see him, and of course we have to go with him because he's a prospect of ours. We all immediately descend the massive staircase, reminiscent of those found in school buildings with their expansive size. Two of them, bop, 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 down, running down. We get to the bottom, that was Iborami. Ismail was already there a bit earlier, but he's part of us too. We were standing outside with one or two supporters and friends from the club, including a Jakob Syrian friend. It's all interconnected. We stood in front of the door and saw intense arguments with people shouting face to face. Around 7-8 people faced off against 3-4 bouncers, all dressed in suits. And then we were in between like, what's going on here? I couldn't even figure out what had just happened. Rami, one of the guys, pushed the carpenter aside and asked what was wrong and what had happened. He said, they're not coming in, they're drunk, just causing trouble, insulting us, threw a bottle, what's this crap, they should get lost, etc. And then one of the guys saw one of the main people, the later victim, Taya Özbek, who was also a ringleader, also an alpha type, I have to say that clearly, always stood at the front, even in conflict situations, as I heard later, which I didn't know at the time. He was a stranger to me, despite living in our neighborhood on Residenzstrasse. I had never encountered him before. And he said, hey, that's Tahir, one of the guys. They immediately recognized each other as they all grew up together in the same neighborhood, which is why I mentioned it. Ah, you have him and so on, brother. We didn't know that was your guy. We're sorry, please, our apologies. We didn't know if we had known. And he said, yeah, that's Ib. Ib is an Arabic Turkish word for, yeah, you just don't do that. That's not okay. That's not proper. But shame on you like that. The Ib that you're doing is our door. You know it. What's the point? Yeah, sorry, we didn't know. I was like, okay, screw it, calm down and all that.
Is basically what you actually...
Actually, yes. And then the situation calmed down after 3 or 4 minutes. Everyone calmed down, apologized, shook hands and said, widdly-wham, we're leaving now. And so on. The bouncers were cheeky, yeah, relax, it's their job, etc. Suddenly from behind it was over. Everyone was about to go back inside and leave. This Jacob Syra's brother shouts into the crowd, "You crazy fucks, you're whatever, assholes, whatever, your mother's," so maximum insult to honor in that area, which always happens pretty quickly, which really surprises me. But that's how this whole scene is, and the guys didn't let that slide twice. Situation actually over.
Completely escalated. And one of them again.
They reignited the conflict by making inflammatory remarks. Being heavily intoxicated, they refused to back down and immediately brandished knives. I think if they hadn't been intoxicated, they wouldn't have dared. And then there were knives, and then all I saw were knives. I don't remember who anymore. Apparently Tari Özbek also had a knife, but for me the situation happened too fast. But definitely possible. And there was stabbing going on, a mass brawl, everyone against each other. We'll find your blah.
Blah, blah.
8 against 67 plus 38 doors as well.
Very confusing.
Just before a massive brawl erupted, the situation turned life-threatening with knives in the crowd. As I was about to intervene, I went in, swung twice and hit 2 guys. At that moment, I got stabbed just under my kneecap from the side, narrowly avoiding a direct hit because I blocked it with a kick. Someone stabbed him, and it was really nasty. I stepped forward, not initially noticing the stab wound. I stepped forward again, but the connection was cut and couldn't hold. I buckled and fell down. I felt pain and couldn't get up. Everything was numb, and you all saw it. A fight erupts, resulting in one person collapsing, another stabbed in the kidney, another in the hand, and another hit on the head. Utter chaos. It happened quickly, but in such situations it always feels much longer. Then it moved to the back. It's a long facade, a door facade. It's a big complex also across from the Redis Park Inn. Anyone who knows the area knows it's a pretty big street with long facades on the buildings, and then it moved into the middle of the street and some people were still knocked out for a while. I saw the sergeant knock someone out and then it was basically over. Then I saw how they ran over to us, the guys from our charter, the ones who belonged to us, and the others ran away and were standing there half beaten up. We also had guys with us. I was stabbed, another one was stabbed through the hand, another was stabbed in the kidney, the friend of the brother, a partner. Suddenly you hear sirens, they arrive quickly in Berlin. The guys urge, "We have to go, we have to go." Grab Purser, one of them grabbed me as I was coming in. He pulled me into his car and drove to the Jewish hospital in Wedding. When we arrived there, of course, they patched me up right away. Of course, they asked, "What happened? What happened?" I told him I slipped during renovation work this evening and landed on my knee on something sharp, possibly a screwdriver. He said it's a nasty spot and they'll take care of it. But they were lucky, they took x-rays, did everything, they were lucky. If it had been 1 centimeter to the side, they would have completely, maybe it would have gone like that. They wouldn't have been able to fix anything anymore. That's just how it is sometimes. Stiff leg. Exactly. But he cleaned it up, drew out the blood, disinfected it, stitched it up. He said, "Let her be, you'll get a drain now. Keep it stiff and let it heal. And in 3 weeks, it'll be fine again." Then we went out, and the child had fallen to the ground. That was kind of a starting point that later led to other things. And of course, there was blood everywhere. Blood was flying everywhere.
It was pretty
Intense. And yeah, that was not easy. How
do you process something like that? Of course, you can't imagine that. I know it myself. Something happened at night. In the morning, there are emergency meetings or something like that. How was it? How do you deal with something like that at night? So you're in the hospital. It feels like an attack against the club as well.
Yes, that's exactly what I would say.
So how does such a machine get started? It's not as simple as saying, they have injured people, we have injured people. Come on, man, it was alcohol, it was a party at night, forget about it.
So it was like this. I was seriously injured myself. I couldn't walk for 3 weeks, 4 weeks. I really couldn't put any weight on it either. My knee had to stay like that for so long. I also had a brace and crutches. I went home only hearing that Cardi was informed through a call made by the sergeant, according to what I was told. Ivo informed Cardi, but nobody told me directly. Afterwards, I was only with Renee, who I think mentioned hearing about it while they were still standing aside, making a quick call before leaving. I'm not entirely certain if he found out then or later, as I can't clearly recall, but it's certain that Cardi was definitely informed. But I went straight home and stayed there. Yes, everyone was clear, I told him. He said, "Guys, I'm beat." At home he knew. He passed everything on, the prospect, Renee, who drove me home. And I didn't notice what happened after that in the days that followed because I was at home. It was, of course, a huge topic. Honestly, it wasn't that dramatic for me. I got injured, but I've dealt with bouncers many times, even before my current job. Sometimes you dish it out, sometimes you take a hit. I'm still kind of old school. I'm kind of an old bar fighter. It's not good. Violence is never good. But that was my attitude back then. It was like a bar brawler team. I could take a hit pretty well. I could also dish it out pretty well. I didn't have a problem with that. And for me, that was it. The guys got hit on the head. They were arrested, reported, and caught by the police. None of us were. For me, it was like, okay, it's happening now. They're done, it's over, and the matter is settled. Conversely, the Hells Angels leadership, the sergeant, the nightclub owner, and others involved saw it differently. And there were quite a few laughs. They questioned the people, something I only found out about later during the trial, and it was proven. I had no idea about it. I didn't get any phone calls like, hey, who was that, and so on. But instead, just a few days later, there were attempts to contact those people, which was also confirmed by the witnesses. With the opposing group, exactly, that's a group. It was a circle of friends, so you can't even really call it a group. It was a circle of friends. They knew each other, were out partying together, and then it happened that they were called in to explain themselves and were told, why was there blood spilled here? What's going on? We're going to take you down, and so on. All of the people except for one, and that one was identified or verified as the main aggressor, the main perpetrator, were part of this group Respec, the later murder victim. They all got into a fight or met up. That was clarified during the court proceedings. They testified themselves and apologized for it, and they made things right, as they say in that environment. They cleared it up, said, hey, sorry, we didn't know. And as far as I understood, they put all the blame on him, saying he was the aggressor and did everything, and that they didn't even know what was happening to them. They were just defending themselves. That was accepted as well, but with him it was different. No money? They tried to extort money from him after a mere apology. But then all of that changed. We'll get to that. And he didn't want to. Tarek Özbek is well known. I didn't know any of that because I was a newcomer. He and Kadir already had a ferry and could settle down. They were acquainted from their time with the Bandidos, where he was once a supporter and a real go-getter. He didn't respect Kadir on his level either, and he probably realized that he was stronger than Kadir. And they were always in conflict somehow. Sometimes off because they didn't have much more to do with each other because of the Bandidos, but Kies she liked. They disliked each other and were acquainted. A woman was involved whom they both allegedly had an affair or fling with. Then one of them didn't really handle it well. I think it was more Tahir, and it was all dealt with in court. I didn't know that. Yeah, and that after about 5 weeks, the situation remained unchanged. Returned to the charter, greeted by well-wishers asking about my well-being. Ismail Sirat, the brother of the silent partner, had a serious hand injury. He had a severe stab wound and a deep cut, requiring him to wear bands for the tendons to heal and regrow. That looked very strange, like, I don't know, it just looked crazy. He was in the hospital for a long time and he had to take strong painkillers and all that. He was more injured from the impact than me, but doesn't the whole chapter visit you when you're home?
No.
They just wrote, nobody came. Isn't that strange? I can't do it any other way. I moved to Berlin and did the entire move by myself without any help. They were 200 meters away as the crow flies and knew I was coming with the truck from Berlin, driving 403 to 400 kilometers.
There was no such thing. There's no one there.
Hey guys, come on, let's send it. We would have gotten in trouble if...
Someone hadn't even gone there?
Yeah, exactly. But it didn't happen like that. There was the text message, I won't forget that. It said, hey, your brother, Easy, they told me he's seriously injured. He's in the hospital. It would be nice if a lot of you visited him too. I got the text message too, but I wasn't mentioned.
That's a fact. It's normal for someone to drop by. Yeah, sure. He brings you a kebab or something to eat. Dude, what happened? Do you want to watch a digital versatile disc, dude? I'll spend some time with you. It's boring or whatever. No.
Only one or two guys, like Selim and so on, called me. How are you? Everything okay? I mean, yeah, everything's good, relaxed. I wouldn't have wanted it any other way, but it was just different.
Yeah, but still, it would have been...
Of course, the gesture itself, but you can see how the situation already was. And, sorry, but at the same time, after this whole situation, that's an important point. We must not forget that. There was a confidential informant in the whole story. From the environment, a confidential informant, you have to say. A confidential informant is a trusted police tool used to infiltrate criminal structures and gather information. Most of the time, they're recruited from this criminal environment themselves and they're paid for it, so they're compensated. And actually, they're not impartial witnesses. You have to be clear about that. Sure, it's an important tool, but it's very difficult to work with. It's not easy for the authorities either, because of course these are very particular characters who usually have their own agendas and lie, scheme, get rid of people they don't like, and even make things up to get paid for it. That doesn't mean they're all like that, but that's how it was for us. It was also proven, and it was a very, very, very difficult situation. Unfortunately, the department at Vice President in Berlin didn't cover themselves in glory either, and they were heavily criticized for it, which is understandable. I spoke with police officers from that time afterwards, since I also work with them, and they said it was really, really terrible back then, and that what happened there must never happen again. That's just how it was. The mistakes weren't intentional. People simply made them in an effort to manage the whole situation. It simply can't happen as people's lives are at risk.
On it. The police also take whatever human resources they can get. Of course, they can work with that. They don't have a free choice. Exactly. They can.
Just can't say, we think that one in Tego is better. That makes sense. It was just like that. They had to work with what they got, and the one they worked with was a complete disaster. But he did, you have to say back then, I think a day later, there was a note in the file, and of course an investigation was then initiated. The informant testified who was involved. That was me. Kadiapade wasn't there, but still. And they put my phone and Ismail Sirar's phone under surveillance. Also for the viewers, TKU means telephone communication surveillance. It's called TKU in technical jargon. And then activated the TKU. There were then notes in the mediation process files stating, the informant tells us, only 2 of us were actually there, me and him. That's a fact, not a lie. And said that Kadiapade had given a murder order in a follow-up conversation to kill Tahir Özbek. It was no longer 48 or 24 hours.
That was already on record.
Then that was on record, of course they have to. They did, I had noted it, there's always such a file note, VP2 or whatever, it went into the file. Telephone surveillance was, as I said, already set up, and then they listened in on the calls. But nothing significant was discussed there. They were also introduced later in the proceedings. That was the situation from the police side and from our side.
Shouldn't a warning conversation with the potential threat have been conducted in Talenspec at the latest by this point? Listen, we have information. Protective custody or whatever, immediately.
The State Criminal Police Office should have immediately, back then the officers, I knew the State Criminal Police Office is always a very general term. The officers who worked on this case and received this information should have immediately passed it on to the department responsible for these matters. They should have immediately informed Palier about the information they had. That something is supposed to happen here. If anything happens to the boy, we have you on our list, and then it's over for you. Then you'll be the first one we come knocking on. If we even bother to knock, maybe we'll just break down the door. We'd immediately have a risk assessment, meaning a threat for the person who's at risk. And for the person at risk, a risk assessment with Mr. Özbek immediately the next day after becoming aware of the note. They should have sent someone out right away the next day and should have kept the Özbek file. Listen, we have information. You had an argument about the Hells Angels, and it's being suggested that you might be at risk.
Might still be alive today.
We're legally obligated to warn you and offer protective custody. We can assign people to you and have conversations to make you aware of the situation if you come with us. That would have happened for Falk Piersman, but it didn't, not from day one. And that's what is still a huge question mark to this day, and something that many departments had to deal with. Even the head of the State Criminal Police Office, Steinhoff, was put under pressure in court about this at the time, and also by journalists, because a lot of things happened that were proven not to be true. The head of the State Criminal Police Office, Steinhoff, received false, contradictory, and inconsistent information, causing the agency to repeatedly correct itself. The man, also present at the proceedings, thought to himself, "Oh, what a mess this is." ... Yeah, shit. It's understandable, considering the hierarchical structure. He can only work with what is passed up to him. As the head of the State Criminal Police Office, he was involved in the infamous information release after the crime, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. Let's stay where we are for now. There was information that it didn't happen, and things continued that way. That's just a fact, yeah. Later, a conflict arose between Özbek, Tahir, the Hells Angels, and eventually Kadir as well.
Do I remember correctly that even Tahir was still giving orders back then? Exactly, I was just about to get to that. That's why I didn't want to go through the process now. We're just,
We jumped around a bit, so guys forget that, or girls forget that out there. Let's stick to the situation for now, otherwise you'll get confused out there. And then it was just that the conflict was simmering, it wasn't resolved. And for me, the matter was over and uninteresting. That's also proven.
I have a really hard time with that. So it's really difficult for me. I mean, you lie there for 3-4
Weeks in,
hospital, let me put it this way, with the ego that you,
we're walking around with,
from back then, respect, I'm street, I'm a hardliner, I'm on the front line, and then to sit at home and say, that's just how it is, that's really hard for me.
yeah, but I wasn't even on that line anymore that you were talking about. That was all at the beginning. Those were just phases. I had moved on and found peace. I no longer wanted to deal with the police. You have to imagine out there, maybe we can't even work in such an advisory way. We were really put through the ringer by the police, the pressure, this 1,000 needle pricks strategy they had back then. And the pressure from the police was so high, you couldn't have any fun in Berlin. And I don't think you even came close to experiencing that with the Black Crew. And that's not meant as a badge of honor, don't take it the wrong way, Philip, but I don't think he ever really experienced that in the countryside or in other cities, no. That's why I was done with the team. I didn't feel like it anymore. It was clear to me that the police were involved. I didn't want the door kicked in again. Back then, even a spark from a lighter could lead to an immediate search warrant.
My time was really tough because of the far right. I also had over 25 house searches.
Yeah, and
It wasn't any different for me. But that already says something about your mindset back then, and a lot of people can't understand that. That, maybe for the first time in your life, you're facing the consequences and you say, okay, I know if I do this now, then cops. Then house search, arrest again.
courts again.
Everything gone. Maybe that's also the first level of reflection. I didn't feel like it anymore.
I was frightened by the special weapons and tactics team's presence. The police were all over the place. We were locked up for minor things because the justice system said, now we're going to...
Yeah, as long as we're out of the way.
No, not just as long as we're out of the way. Of course, they have to abide by the rule of law, that's clear. They can't just do it for trivial matters. But at the end of the day, they said, we're taking the tough route and there are no compromises. Where maybe with the autonomous person, they said, come on. We're not sending a special weapons and tactics team or starting an investigation. He should come, make a statement, and let the court decide. Nobody needs to be detained for that because we only have a kilo, which was immediately taken off the street. There was deliberate pressure demanded and wanted by both politics and the judiciary, which was then carried out. That's what I mean with the 1,000 cuts and so on. They really...
Okay, then I can understand that because that's...
and exactly, maybe it slipped out sometimes when we talked about this topic, but that was my mindset and I just didn't feel like it anymore. I didn't feel like doing SEK anymore. I just didn't want to do it anymore. Man, I think the most during my time when I was checked in one day was 8 times by the same unit. Unit, you know what that is, right?
The ones with the big van. I meant no offense, it was a rhetorical question. No, I think those typical vans only exist in Berlin.
They're mainly in Berlin and occasionally in Hamburg, primarily during Bundesliga games.
But in
Berlin, they're mostly standard, even on the street.
Yeah, all in the front and sometimes fully occupied because of the clientele, exactly.
That's always like 20, 30 times.
But 8?
8.
There.
You don't feel like doing anything anymore.
I would say some of my friends have maybe only ever dealt with the police once in their lives at most. That's only because you sometimes get stopped here for a car check. 8 times in one.
8 times in one day, and the full program, right? Everything out of your pockets, hands on the wall, sit down questioning. The questioning takes half an hour, then again, stand up, take a photo. I walked around with emblems and t-shirts, not always wearing vests. They took pictures, then allowed me to leave. I think I was inside for an hour, somewhere inside, and they had already rolled out again. They were totally unfazed by it. That was the message. Yeah, that's all that mattered. Of course, that was intentional. It had its purpose and it made sense. And that's why I also say to the police, like when I give a few lectures at the police, they ask me what makes sense for us to keep doing because they also want my perspective from the other side from back then. The way I did it back then, pressure, that's the only thing. You will never get the situation under control 100%. There will always be crime, but if you are determined, you have to contain it so it doesn't get out of hand. Pressure, 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 pressure on all authority levels, and then you'll get through to them and the guys won't feel like it anymore, and I'm speaking from experience. That was just a quick final sentence on the topic because you brought it up, and that was my mindset. I didn't feel like it anymore, and
I was also glad that I wasn't arrested that day. That's understandable to me too, because, but that's, then you feel like, okay, something has already happened here, and your subconscious always kind of says, come on, what for again, again, jail, all those things. I still have
a situation for you. At that time, it was also summer, and we still had the Bandidos chapter Escalate nearby, so a Bandidos chapter. And the president of that chapter lived across from me. So I lived here. It's a long street, so the house faces the street. And then, of course, there was a little intersection, and right across from the intersection was a residential building. That's where the president of that chapter lived. And one day I went outside, ran out. Back then there were times when I drove without a driver's license. Also known, all good. So I walked over to the car and parked it in the corner. I stood there, of course I was also totally wearing lemon. He opens the door and sees me too, while Mrs. Bandidos is wearing his vest. We look at each other. His face drops. I look at him similarly. I open the car, get in and drive off. He closes the door. Neither of us were in the mood. I thought, oh, why should I attack him now? That's not why I'm here, whatever. I left to drive somewhere, give a lecture, earn some money, and have a nice fish meal. The guy wants to go to the clubhouse, but neither of us feel like it. Goodbye. I never told anyone. Because I said, well, in the club, it's obvious that's where I came out.
Yeah, of course.
That's why I had already reached that point, and so the situation back then wasn't any different, and we addressed it properly early on. They were able to verify it based on other things, because at first they also asked themselves, okay, understandable, sure, the question is critical. And I don't think there's anything wrong with asking such a critical question. It makes sense, I would do the same. But it was addressed. Well, we went to court, and it could be clarified, because the court, of course, the opposing lawyers also tried to accuse me of being a provocateur and that I tried to push everything forward like that, but there's phone surveillance. I never made any phone calls.
Blah, blah, blah. But that's just the situation regarding the topic.
Yeah, can you imagine? This confidant just said that Kadir Padir solved a murder involving Mrs. Kloss.
Can you imagine? No, we're speaking theoretically. No. No. Not in a way that this confidant would have noticed as well. No. Or do you generally not believe that it... No. Okay.
Of course, you can always say afterwards why he did say it, a couple of murderers, is the boy going to be killed? Yes, but a lot happened in between. I'm firmly convinced we're jumping in now. This is a complex and important topic for viewers, as I've never publicly discussed this situation and the events of this month in such depth, except during the public court hearing. It's crucial for viewers to grasp what occurred there. And it was like this, as you already mentioned, you also noticed that he kept provoking you more and more and everything, and that's a fact.
Even outsiders noticed it? Yeah, and that's how it was. I think it even went on social media at some point.
No, not that.
That's to me.
I don't remember that now. But he started in the neighborhood, he went after the people, the small runners who sold coke for a few guys, he banned them from the area, he spoke very badly about charter in the neighborhood, and especially insulted Kadir Padi massively, also very deliberately in public so that it would get back to them. We also have phone surveillance of people calling him and quoting what he said. Can I ask about that?
Isn't that also on the part of this guy here, Özbek? I know he's the victim here, but you still have to differentiate a little bit.
Of course, like we have to describe the circumstances.
Isn't that also, like, for example, us as a small village club, we would have known, man, that's out of our league. We would have backed down.
Let it be. You'll only lose.
Exactly. So either he couldn't grasp it cognitively, or he just didn't care, or he thought, yeah, me against the world, I don't know, but that's just drum battling, you know? Yeah, exactly. I could also assess people and knew, okay, let it go now, let it go. And he could have... It
would have been the smartest thing if he hadn't been the way he was. I can add to that, the court really hit the nail on the head, named a term and labelled K-Bambo. D and him as well, professionally and legally on a psychological level, to make it understandable for people. They were both dissocial zealots and severely narcissistic, disturbed personalities. Of course, I'm sorry also for the family that I'm saying it like this, but I'm just repeating what the court said, and wait.
Just a moment.
Just a moment. Of course. And since we're already talking about it, one could have, if the whole situation, I don't even want to say it. It would have been much better if he had joined them back then, just to also to protect his life. It's just about that now. The angels need me. It's not about anything else. It's just about protecting his body and life. He should have just gone along with that wave of apologies that were happening. I said, I'm sorry. Okay, screw it. I apologize. I'm just doing this now. Currently, I'm selling and doing coke, but some can't do it anymore, and that's the point. That's why I just said, and the court had him evaluated based on the statements for the report and so on. It's always difficult, but they did it and they came to the conclusion he's gone, and the party, that's the social age and severely narcissistic personalities and antisocial rivals, and no one was able or willing or even capable to take a step back because that's just how they were mentally, and that led to it always. Kept escalating. The situation remained tense with Tahir and others exchanging verbal outbursts, threats and insults.
Then I would now, since we have a very long section again before it saves, of course, so we're really into it, let's take a short break for data backup. Thank you also for this depth, for helping to understand it with the explanations. Yes, so
Well, I also know that for the people out there, they don't just get information in a superficial way, because you also want to know what was going on back then. I understand that. That's why we're sitting here together, and also as a preventive measure for future cases, maybe even for the police. Who am I to give the police tips? But unfortunately, not everything went right there, and maybe you can...
a few, I also know how many law enforcement agencies watch my content or something like that. That's why maybe next time a lot
faster. Better to say it twice than not at all. And listen to the street. And not just listen to the street, but also when we have the official note, go to the people and say, hey, stop. They did it, but not this time. I have another example for later.
We'll do that in a moment. So Kassra, thank you very much. Check out Kassra's book. The Persian is linked below. Of course, go buy it. You'll gain more insights upon rereading the entertaining book, which I've done twice. Many thanks to all channel members. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Feel free to comment. Leave nice comments even if you generally think it's crap. Okay, you can give constructive criticism, but hate and incitement are not opinions. Many thanks to Thorsten and everyone. As always, I bid you ahoy from the coast.